Will Canyon discontinue the Spectral on and the Torque on? I think there's a distinct possibility that that's going to happen. As you know, they have recalled the batteries on both of these bikes, and we're waiting to hear what they're going to do about it. Chance that they're going to have new batteries for us. You can make that call. I don't have any inside information, but I think there's a good chance they're not going to have those for us. In which case, we need to consider what they might do. And this video is going to help you in making a choice between another Canyon bike if what they choose to do is give us a discount on those. Now, I certainly hope that Canyon will not discontinue the Spectral on and the Torque on. I have the Spectral on. It's a great bike. But the chance that they're going to design, prototype, get approval for, and produce enough batteries for all of us here in the next month or so, I think are pretty slim. And if that's the case, what I'm hoping Canyon does is gives us a refund on our current bikes, and for Canyon's sake, to keep us as Canyon customers, gives us a big discount on one of their other bikes. Now, I'm going to go through each of their other bikes because they've put out several more e-mountain bikes than were available when I bought my Spectral on. In the US, the Spectral on was my only choice when I bought that bike. I put together a summary on each of their bikes, including the bikes that they've recalled, and I've done a head-to-head comparison of each of these bikes. You can get this information on their website. Most of the information comes from their website. This is just a quick way for you to peruse each of their bikes and what I think are the most important aspects of each one. When you look at these comparisons, I've put together some information that may not be readily apparent on their website. One of them is the categorization of the bike. There's a 3E, a 4E, and a 5E categorization, and they're intended to designate these bikes as either rough trail, rough downhill, or extreme jumping. And the bikes are built to handle those types of trails. So you want to make sure you're getting a bike that matches your type of riding. The first bike Canyon offers is the Grand Canyon On. It's different than the rest because it's a hardtail. It doesn't have a rear suspension, but it's a really good bike for just standard trail riding if you're not doing a lot of rocky downhills. It's got full power and a good sized battery, so this bike will go a long ways. It's also a very good price at $2,800 for the base model. It's less than half of what their most expensive base model bike is. The next bike is the Neuron On Fly. And On Fly designation means it's one of their lighter bikes, which means they put a smaller battery in it, and it's built with a little less suspension. It's also a 3E designated bike, so it's made for rough trails but not rough downhills. The Spectral On Fly is now one of my personal favorites. It is probably a good choice for somebody who owns a Spectral On now. The On Fly is their lighter version of the bike. It is built a little bit more oriented downhill when you consider the geometry. Has full suspension, doesn't have full power. So it has the TQ motor, which is my personal favorite, a great high quality solid motor that's almost silent, but it doesn't have as much power, about half the power as the Spectral On. And because of that, it has a smaller battery to get, because you're not going to be using up the battery as quickly. If you get the range extender and you use it in mid-power, you're going to have a much more difficult time going uphill, but you probably get the same amount of time out of the bike. And downhill is definitely going to be very similar to what you find on a Spectral On. I'm not going to talk about the Spectral On much because that's one of the bikes that has been discontinued, but for comparison purposes, I put it in here. And this bike was intended for trail use and rough downhill trail, and that's definitely what I use it for. It's got a good amount of suspension, definitely got the big battery that we now know is a problem, and a full power motor that goes with it. The next bike in their lineup is the Strive On. This was not available when I bought my Spectral On. It may have been a bike that I would have purchased if it had been available, but It is a little bit more race-oriented, a little bit more race geometry, similar, actually a little bit more suspension than the Spectral On, and built for the same rough downhills. It's got a good-sized battery, good motor in it, and with the battery extender, which is now available for that motor, you could get 1,000 watt-hours of this bike. So a good full power bike with a large battery. This may be a good option for people who currently own the Torque On. So the Torque On carbon fiber model is the next bike in the lineup that I'm covering, and it is made for extreme jumping. So the two Torque models they have are really intended for sort of bike park oriented riding, very downhill oriented. Even though the Torque On CF has a really good sized battery, it's one of the reasons we probably bought that bike, but that battery is not available anymore, and we'll see if they can provide us a new one. So for comparison purposes, I put it in here, but if you're looking for something similar, probably, as I mentioned, the Strive On is the best next choice. Now, of course, there is the Torque On aluminum. And the reason I don't say that is another choice, because it is, even though it is the same name and it is good for extreme jumping, it is a very different bike. It has less, the geometry is different. It has less wheelbase, and the battery and the motor are much smaller. Otherwise, things are very similar in terms of suspension. So now I'm going to do a head-to-head comparison on these bikes. And if you're enjoying this video, please give it a thumbs up. Give me any comments you have, and please, importantly, subscribe to the channel. So weight is the first comparison. And you can really tell which bikes are built stout for downhill or for jumping because they get heavier. Now, of course, the battery makes a big difference and the motor makes a big difference in the weight. And so one of these bikes does stand out as lighter weight, even though it is downhill oriented, and that is the Spectral On Fly. Now, it is quite a bit smaller battery and quite a bit less power. Now, if you're willing to put a little bit more effort in going uphill and perhaps use the battery extender, the On Fly version of the Spectral is going to be very similar to the Spectral, but obviously not as much fun perhaps going uphill. So that brings me to battery size. Now, 900 watt-hour batteries are very unique to the Canyon Spectral On and Torque On, and we don't know if they're going to provide us with another battery of that size. In that case, we're going to have to make some sort of trade-off, either in the amount of time that we're riding the bike or the amount of power that we're using. If you're using less power, you may as well go with a bike that has a motor with less power. If you're going to ride for less time, then you can go with something like the Strive On that has a smaller battery. And in that case, you could get a battery extender and extend the distance that you're riding. Of course, the Torque On aluminum is a choice, but it has a much smaller battery and less options for extending it. Of course, you can almost make your decision on which bike is best for you and how much suspension it has, because it tells you a lot about the bike. Much more suspension means it's more downhill oriented. A bike has to be built burlier to handle that, and it's probably going to be more downhill oriented. It's also going to be less agile in sort of your tighter trails if you're just trail riding. So making a choice based on suspension is not a bad way to go. Last but not least is price. Now, these bikes range anywhere from $2,800 to $6,000. But there are bikes out there that are much more expensive, and we probably chose Canyon in the first place because of the price. They distinguish themselves in that category. Now, the other thing you'll think about is quality. I happen to think Canyon makes a quality bike. Problem they've had has been this battery. They kind of got out there and made their own battery for two of these bikes, and that is obviously a mistake they're having to live with now and try to correct. Otherwise, these bikes, the rest of their bikes in the lineup don't have that same problem. They use batteries from the same manufacturer that makes the motor. And in Bosch's case, they're qualified as UL 2849 certified. And that is the gold standard at this point, I think, for certifications of batteries. So I wouldn't worry about these other bikes' batteries. They seem to be built really well. So what are we going to do? I hope this video helps you in the event that Canyon offers you a discount on one of their bikes to be your future bike. I also hope there's a possibility that they give us batteries that match the batteries we have in the Spectral and the Torcon. I'm just not sure if that's possible. If the video helped you, please let me know. Give me any comments. Give me any of your thoughts on what you think the comparison should be on these bikes and whether you think Canyon is in your future. I know a lot of you have been very disappointed, as I have, about what's happened with these bikes, and I've got a lot of feedback on some of the responses that you all have had from Canyon over the last several weeks. I'm hoping that Canyon does the right thing for us and that we can either ride our bikes that we have now or ride one of their other bikes that of our choosing. We'll find out in a couple of weeks what they're going to do. I'll keep you posted. Until then, thanks for watching.